Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are here to break down the Week 11 main slate of college football DFS. That's right, we are in Week 11 already. It is officially November. It's crunch time for the college football season, and time is running out on us playing DFS for the college football season. So let's enjoy it while we have it, and let's make some money here in Week 11. We've got a 12-game slate on DraftKings. FanDuel has a main slate up as well. They've got some of the night games in there, but a lot of the games on this slate are going to be on the FanDuel slate as well, so you can use all of the player takes on here for the FanDuel slate. But we're going to break down all 12 games, let you know what we think about each game, let you know who needs to be in your DFS lineups from each game, and just give you overall general strategy to help you win some money playing DraftKings and FanDuel college football DFS here this weekend. If you have not already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for all of our other college football DFS slates that we cover. We were able to record for the two Maction slates this week. We hope to have out an episode for the Saturday night slate as well. In addition to all of our college football coverage, we've also got college basketball, which we're going to have coming out periodically as well. Once college football ends, we're pretty much going to be a college basketball show. So make sure you're subscribed. That we can be with us for all of that content. Also, I can't promise that I'm going to get to every midweek slate because we are officially in my busy season. I'm actually coaching two varsity sports in my high school right now. I'm coaching girls flag football for the first time ever, as well as varsity boys basketball. So it's my busy season. I can't promise that I'm going to be able to get to all these midweek slates every week, but if you're subscribed to the channel, you'll be able to know when they drop. All right, so let's go ahead and get things started. We got 12 games to break down. It's already kind of late at night here, my time as I'm recording this. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so game number one, we are kicking it off early with my Texas Longhorns. While I am not enthusiastic about them having a 12 p.m. tip, 11 a.m. local time, which to me is weird. I do have a flag football game this weekend that's going to be going on right when this starts, so hopefully I'll be able to get home and catch the end of it. Anyway, Texas is 21.5-point favorites in this game against Florida with a game total of 47.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 34-13 in favor of the Longhorns. Remember, we don't do decimal points in our implied totals. We always round off because you can't score 0.25 of a point in an actual football game. On the Florida side, I gotta feel like they don't expect DJ Lagway to play in this game. He did leave the Georgia game early. Their offense was quite inept after that. And really, I think that when you look at the point spread, I don't think it would be as large if DJ Lagway was expected to play in this game. If he does not go, it will be Aiden Warner starting. And like I said, their offense was pretty much incompetent after DJ Lagway got hurt. He was 7 for 22, 66 yards, an interception, negative rushing yards on the day. I just don't see any upside to playing Aiden Warner. I don't see any upside to playing anybody on this offense if DJ Lagway's out. I just don't expect them to score any points against a Texas defense that rates out very highly in both rushing and passing defense. Montreal Johnson Jr., almost said Michi, the college basketball player. Montreal Johnson Jr. could be a workhorse running back if he's back in the lineup. If not, that would go to Jaden Ball. At the wide receiver position, Eugene Wilson III is done for the season. Elijah Badger is questionable, but it's hard to get excited about anybody in this offense going up against a great defense with a third-string quarterback. On the Texas side, they're implying to score 34 points. So this is a great team to target in general. However, Quinn Ewers is entirely too expensive. We've talked time and time again where in DraftKings DFS, you want 3 times value for their salary in terms of fantasy points. So for Quinn Ewers sitting there at $8,500, that's about 25 fantasy points. And he has not done that at all this season, not even in blowout wins, not even in competitive games, not even in kind of shootouty games. He just hasn't. So I just don't see any way in which he's playable, in my opinion. I don't think that throwing the ball is how you attack this Florida team either. The Texas running backs have a lot of interest from me. Florida does give up 176 rushing yards per game, which ranks 95th in the nation. Now, Texas is using a little bit of a committee between Jaden Blue and Quintravion Wisner. Blue was the starter at the start of the season. He's still consistently seeing double-digit touches when he's active, and he's consistently seeing usage in the passing game, 13 catches in the last 3 games combined. So that usage in the passing game plus his general per-touch upside does give me a little bit of hope in playing him. I think, though, that Quintravion Wisner is the better play, and I think he's going to be much more highly owned. Wisner has been the better back recently. He's also seen usage in the passing game. He's caught 14 passes over the last 3 games, and he's gotten more carries in the last 3 games. He's out-touched Blue in every single game. So I do think that Wisner is on paper the better play, but I think that Blue is going to be much lower ownership. Blue is a guy who is a big play waiting to happen. He can break off long runs at a moment's notice. So I'm definitely going to be playing both. Now, I know what some of y'all are probably thinking, wait a minute, Mike, you normally don't like running back committees at all. Why are you willing to play both of these guys? Well, first off, their price tags are pretty cheap, $5,400 for Blue and $5,000 for Wisner. Second off, the matchup is great. Florida gives up 176 rushing yards a game. That means that both these guys could very easily get us 85 to 90, and if they score, that's 15 fantasy points right there. And then third off, they're just I kind of don't remember what I was going to say for third off, but they're good. Like this is a very reasonable price tag for two guys that are in a committee. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be playing Blue and Wisner. And honestly, I know I was going somewhere with that third off, but I can't remember what it was. So we're just going to go and move on to the wide receiver position. So Isaiah Bond is listed as probable. He is the wide receiver one when he's active, not super productive in recent weeks when the Texas passing offense was a little bit down. But he is the guy that you would want to play. DeAndre Moore Jr. had a big breakout game against Vanderbilt, 6 catches, 97 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was largely because those targets couldn't go to Isaiah Bond. And after that, like really after Bond, they just play a huge rotation at receiver. Cook, Golden, and Bolden and Wingo are all going to play considerable snaps. It's just touchdown or bust plays, in my opinion. The tight end Gunnar Helm does play a lot also, but he's not really like a big play type of guy. He's only $3,200. I could very easily see him paying off that price tag and getting you like 10 fantasy points, but just not a whole lot of interest from me really in this Texas passing attack. I want to target Texas through the 2 running backs. Next up, we have West Virginia heading to Cincinnati to take on the Bearcats. Cincinnati's 4.5-point favorites with a game total of 56.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 31-26 in favor of Cincinnati. On the West Virginia side, normal starting quarterback Garrett Green is listed as doubtful for this game, which means that Nico Marchiol is going to get the start. He is a pretty serviceable backup, though. He started against Arizona, scored 19.8 fantasy points. That's not bad. Cincinnati's defense is you can kind of attack them either way you want to. They rank 75th in the nation, giving up 157 rushing yards. They rank 83rd in the nation, giving up 240 passing yards. So really, this is a team that you can have whatever you want against them. West Virginia, though, is a team that's going to look to do it by running the football, especially with Marchiol. In the 2 games that he's played considerable amount of snaps, Marchiol had 9 carries against Kansas State, 11 carries against Arizona. So he is a little bit of a runner. And West Virginia ranks 20th in the country in rush rate. So to me, Marchiol's upside is through the ground game. And I definitely think he's going to make my player pool because of that. At the running back spot, the big news here is that CJ Donaldson is questionable. And if he does not play, that instantly opens up opportunity because this is nearly a 50-50 committee between Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson. White just barely getting an edge in recent games. And so if Donaldson is out and all of a sudden White is getting a ton of the carries, then White is going to be one of the best plays on the slate. Regardless, even if Donaldson does play, I think you can play both these guys. I think you can make some of the similar arguments that I was making for Blue and Wisner for White and Donaldson. They're cheap. It's a good matchup. This is a team that loves to run the football. So I definitely think that Jaheim White is going to make my player pool with or without CJ Donaldson. If Donaldson is active, I'm probably not even going to pull the trigger, though, just because I don't know if he's going to be 100%. And if even if Donaldson is active, I still think White could see more work because of Donaldson coming in banged up. Now, at the receiver spot, this has been a very frustrating team to target. At the wide receiver position, especially when trying to stack with quarterback Garrett Green, because they generally are a little bit unpredictable, but they're starting to see more of a condensed target tree between Hudson Clement, Treylon Ray, and Cole Taylor. Cole Taylor is the tight end. He is the most comfortable target, generally sees the most receptions in games, most consistently in terms of his fantasy output, just needs to find the end zone. Really, I think you're banking on a touchdown if you play him. Treylon Ray has been a really solid receiver for them in recent weeks. He scored double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his last 5, and he's only $3,800. Hudson Clement is the one of this receiver group, though, that could break a slate. He does have the biggest performance of the season when he had 25 DraftKings points against Kansas, and he did have some big DraftKings performances last year. So I could certainly see the argument of playing any of these 3 guys, especially if you're stacking them with Nico Marchiol. On the not on the Kansas side, on the Cincinnati side, this is a team that really is balanced offensively. They rank 51st in the nation in pass rate with nearly a 50-50 split between pass plays and run plays. West Virginia is certainly a team that you want to attack on the air, though. They rank 106th in the nation in passing yards allowed, which to me just rings up a good matchup for Brennan Sorsby, right? And when you look at his fantasy point totals, they're nearly directly correlated with Cincinnati's actual point totals, which, kind of makes sense considering he is the quarterback. But with them being implied to score 31 in this spot, the 2 games that they scored over 31 points, 40 DraftKings points, 38 DraftKings points for Brendan Sorsby. So if you think the Cincinnati offense has success, which I do, I think that this is a great spot for Sorsby. I think he is probably one of the better plays on the slate at the quarterback position. At the running back spot, Corey Kiner is a workhorse running back. West Virginia, like we said, that was a little bit weaker through the pass than by ground. But if they're going to score on the ground, it's going to be Corey Kiner. Like, he is a big-time workhorse back. He had 17 carries last game to Evan Pryor's 5. So I definitely like Kiner as a back that is probably going to make my player pool. At the wide receiver spot, it's pretty simple. It's a very condensed target tree. Xavier Henderson He's by far the best receiver in this Cincinnati receiving room. He's had the biggest DraftKings games. Just cannot stress enough if you're stacking swords, but he's the most likely candidate. The tight end Joe Royer also has had some huge games. He's a little bit priced up from where we've been used to seeing him, but he absolutely can hit value for that price tag. We've seen him do it. 3 out of the last 4 games, he's been over 13 DraftKings points, which would give you 3 times value for a salary of $4,000. So I really do like Royer based on that math. And then Tony Johnson has come on a little bit lately. The last 4 games, he's had over 4 catches in every game. He has had over 15 DraftKings points in 3 of the 4. I think he's in a pretty good spot, and I think he's really too cheap at $3,600. So I really do think that this Cincinnati team, it's really easy to pick 1 or 2 of the pass catchers to stack with Sorsby and just hope that they have all their success through the air. Next game up, we've got Syracuse taking on Boston College. Boston College is currently 2-point favorites with a game total of 53.5, meaning the implied total is about 28 to 26 in favor of the Eagles. For Syracuse, Boston College is kind of a balanced defense. They're not great in either category. They're ranked 67th in the nation in rushing yards allowed, 93rd in the nation in passing yards allowed, so slightly weaker towards the pass. Kyle McCord started the season outstanding. He looked like an entirely brand new football player, and then the last 2 weeks, he's pretty much looked like the Kyle McCord that we remember from Ohio State, and in fact, I would say worse than that. So, yeah, the question is, which Kyle McCord are you going to get? Are you going to get the one at the start of the season that had 5 straight games of 27 DraftKings points or more? Or are you going to get the one who has played the last 3 games and not top 23 DraftKings points? I don't know, but $9,000 is a lot to pay to find out. I'm probably going to be off of McCord this week. At running back, though, I am going to be on LeQuint Allen. He has one of the most steady workloads out of any running back on the slate, and I do think that there are backs priced above him who rate out as better plays, so I don't think LeQuint Allen is going to be all that owned, but he is super consistently targeted in the passing game. Every game he's been active this season, he has caught at least 2 passes for at least 24 yards, and you have also seen him get at least 15 carries in every single game but 1 this season. So really, this is a guy who is guaranteed to be involved in the game, super steady workload, no complaints about playing him at 8,100. And like I said, I think it's going to be at low ownership. At the wide receiver spot, this is kind of a mess now because what we had at the start of the season was we had Trevor Pena, we had Arondé Gadsden. It was just super condensed between those 2 guys, right? Well, since then, Jackson Meeks has gotten healthy. He's a big part of the passing game. And then Justice Ross Simmons played his first game last week against Virginia Tech, 4 catches, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns in that one for 24.8 DraftKings points. And then, oh, by the way, Amari Hatchard is still part of the game plan as well. So, like, you just have all these options at the receiving room. It's a lot harder to pick a stacking partner with Kyle McCord than it used to be. It's a lot harder to pick any of these guys as a one-off piece than they used to be because there's so much competition for targets. So it's probably a situation that unless I change my mind and decide to play Kyle McCord, I'm probably avoiding altogether here this week. On the Boston College side, they are quarterbacked by Thomas Castellanos, which, quick side note, if you are not aware, Tom Brenneman is now calling games for the CW college football. Yes, that Tom Brenneman that back in 2020 had the famous apology on air with the quote, there's a deep drive to left field by Castellanos. It'll be a 4-0 ball game. Yeah, that Tom Brenneman is now calling games on the CW. This game is on the CW. So we've got an opportunity to hear Tom Brennan talk about deep throws to the left side of the field by Castellanos, and I think that is glorious. I think it's outstanding that coincidence happened, and that Boston College's quarterback, his last name is Castellanos. Anyway, Thomas Castellanos is simply too cheap. This is a quarterback that has a ton of rushing upside. He's had at least 15 carries in his last 2 games. This Syracuse defense is not great. I really do think that Castellanos is way too cheap. He's certainly going to make my player pool. Boston College is implied for 26 points. So that pretty much implies them for 3 touchdowns. If he gets 3 total touchdowns, he's going to pay off value at $6,600. At the running back spot, it's a very much 50-50 committee. Last week, it was Trayshawn Ward over Kai Robichaux, 13-10. We've kind of had a recurring theme of running back committees on here, and I got to say, this is probably the one we've talked about so far that I would be least likely to target, just because neither of these guys have super steady usage in the passing game. There's also a way that Castellanos could vulture rushing touchdowns. So I'm really not feeling either of these 2 guys. I'm not feeling this committee. I'm going to probably play running backs from the other 2 committees that we talked about ahead of those guys. At the wide receiver position, there's really only one name we need to worry about. It is Lewis Bond. He's very clearly the number 1 wide receiver for this team. I'm only probably playing him in Thomas Castellanos stacks, though. Kamari Morales is the tight end. He's been pretty good recently. Again, only in Castellanos stacks. And then the second receiver is Jaden Skeet, who has a total of 1 catch for 1 yard in his last 2 games combined. He really came back down to earth after a solid start to the season. So again, only in Castellanos stacks am I going to be getting to a Boston College receiver. Game number 4. This is a pretty good one. We've got Miami heading to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech. Miami is 11-point favorites with a game total of 63.5, which is tied for the highest total on the slate. Miami is currently implied to win this one 37-26. For the Georgia Tech defense, they ranked 69th in passing yards allowed, 34th in rushing yards allowed. So to me, this seems like a little bit of a passing funnel with Georgia Tech having a good run defense. And that is music to the ears of anybody who wants to play Cam Ward. Cam Ward, with a bounce-back game against Duke, now has had over 32 DraftKings points in every single game this season except one against Florida State, where Florida State, in my personal opinion, played a very what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe gimmicky defense. They basically backed everybody up and said, hey, we're not going to let you throw bombs. We're going to make you drive down the field and beat us. It was very much a strategy of, we don't want to get blown out and embarrassed in this game. And it just led to a bad fantasy performance from Cam Ward. I'm not a big fan of that strategy. So anyway, I think this is a great bet for Cam Ward with Georgia Tech being a little bit of a passing funnel with his price tag being $10,600. You need those 32 DraftKings points to pay it off. But with Georgia Tech being a strong run defense, he's going to have to put that up if they want to win and get to their team total. At the running back position, it's a committee again. Martinez and Fletcher. Last game, Martinez had 11 carries. Fletcher had 12. What's interesting about that is that Fletcher is the cheaper one at only $3,900. So to me, if I were to play anybody, it would be Fletcher because they're getting the same amount of work and he's $2,200 cheaper. But like I said, Georgia Tech's a pretty good run defense. At the wide receiver position, Xavier Estrepo is very clearly this team's wide receiver 1. He was his usual self against Duke after a down game against Florida State. If Cam Ward's having a big game, it's pretty likely that Restrepo's having a big game. So, yeah, the stack is a little bit expensive, but I get it. I definitely think that it's a play to play Ward and Restrepo stacked together. I also like Isaiah Horton at $5,200. He continues to be the second most used receiver for this offense, just continually, and he's the guy that I would recommend as a second stacking option. Last week, one of my best lineups was a Ward, Restrepo, Horton stack where you just make the rest of the lineup work because you can go ahead and pencil in that group as a combined, 60 fantasy points. Jacoby George, Elijah Arroyo, Sam Brown Jr. all still playing significant snaps in this offense, but much less consistency in the passing game as opposed to Restrepo and Horton. Next up on the Georgia Tech side, Haynes King, their quarterback, is questionable for this game. I think he's a great play if he's active. This is a guy who will ran for over 100 yards against North Carolina, put up 30 DraftKings points in that game. And Miami is a defense that is a little bit of a pass funnel. They rank 63rd in passing yards allowed. They rank 10th in rushing yards allowed. So I think this game is going to feature passing aplenty as long as Haynes King is active. If Pyron is active, I think that lessens the likelihood that this game turns into a shootout. I think it lessens the overall upside for the Miami guys because I think it's more likely to be a blowout. So really we want Haynes King to be active, not just so that we can play Haynes King, but so that we can play the Miami guys as well. I do like Jamal Haynes in this one. He is very much a product of the offense he's in. And what I mean by that is he does have some usage in the passing game. He does have the ability to break off long runs. When Georgia Tech scores a lot of points, with the exception of the FCS opponent VMI, Jamal Haynes tends to score a good amount of DraftKings points. So I'm definitely willing to try him out there as kind of as a contrarian play because, yes, Miami's a pretty good run defense. But if Haynes King's out there, this team's going to be scoring up and down the field. And Haynes is going to be a guy who's probably going to be a beneficiary of one of those. At the receiver spot, it is pretty easy to target Rutherford and Singleton because they're really the only two guys that get the ball thrown to them. The question is always which one, and the answer to that has varied game by game. Singleton has been slightly more productive from a DraftKings perspective when Zach Pyron has been the quarterback recently, but yet Rutherford's gotten more total targets. The targets have just been less lucrative for Rutherford because he's targeted in more shallow areas of the field, whereas Singleton gets the downfield shots. Singleton has been scoring more touchdowns. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick breather right there, and we're going to continue on with the next segment. Now, I do want to mention before we continue, there are ways where you can get more information from me. First off, feel free to follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I will happily answer any questions that you have if you reach out to me on Twitter. I'm recording this show here on a Wednesday night, and obviously the slate kicks off on Saturday. So sometimes opinions change in between now and kickoff. Injuries happen, stuff like that. If you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to let you know if my opinion on the guy has changed. And if you ask me any questions, I'm just happy to answer. And you also get any updates from the show because I do try to tweet those out. Also, I'm in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description. It is entirely free, unlike other Discords. And what you get in the Fantasy Corner Discord is a lot of really smart people, also really good people that I personally enjoy hopping in there and talking to every single day. That can, they're just in there talking lineups, talking strategy, and then sweating it out together. It's a great group to be a part of. If you're looking for people to talk DFS with, or just people to just sweat it out with, it's absolutely a blast of a community to be a part of. And we don't just have college football covered. We've got college basketball, which has been really jumping lately. We got NFL, NBA. It's just a great community to be a part of, and I cannot recommend it enough. I also write an article to my Patreon for every single college football DFS slate where I profile my core plays as well as why they're my core plays. Now, obviously, I can't just promise that you're instantly going to plug those in and just print money. It's not how it works. But what I can promise is that you can get some very well-researched, well-thought-out plays from somebody who knows what they're talking about with college football and can help you get better at your college football DFS game. All right, let's go ahead and continue on with our next game, which is going to be Minnesota taking on Rutgers. The rare Big Ten game that actually feels like a Big Ten game now. Minnesota's 6.5-point favorites with a game total of 46.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 26-20 in favor of Minnesota. And I got to be honest, this is a little higher than I thought it was going to be when you think about these two teams, right? Max Brosmer is the quarterback for Minnesota. I think he's slightly overpriced. He had the huge game against Maryland, huge game against USC. Yeah, those are like the two worst defenses in the Big 12. He hasn't done that against better competition. So I'm kind of not buying him at a salary of $6,000, even though I do kind of like him as a player more than I used to. But I think he's a little too expensive. At the running back position, I love Darius Taylor this week. Love him. I think he's one of the top running back plays on the slate, very clearly, in my opinion. Rutgers gives up 196 rushing yards per game, and with Taylor's workload, you can be certain that most of that, if they're able to hit that average, is going to be by Darius Taylor. He just has an incredible workload. He scored a touchdown in 3 straight. He also has a super high floor because of his usage in the passing game. He's caught 17 total passes combined in the last 3 games, a little over 100 yards combined in the last 3 games. So this is a guy who's going to be used in both ways. Good matchup, good game environment, checks all the boxes, great running back play. Now, at the wide receiver position, I do think you can target one of 2 Minnesota receivers as one-off plays, even if you're not playing quarterback Max Brosmer, the first of which is Daniel Jackson. We have been on him each of the last 2 weeks, really last 3 weeks, and he hasn't disappointed. Against Illinois, he did have 10 combined targets, which is pretty solid. He only caught 5 of them for 74 yards, but the workload is there. The target share is there. He averages about 30% on the season, which is really solid. Elijah Spencer's also creeping up there. He had 7 targets against Illinois, 7 targets against Maryland. Definitely a guy that you can get to at $3,800, and I'm more than willing to play both those guys as one-off plays here on this slate. On the Rutgers side, you have a revenge game for Ethan Kaliakmanis. It's interesting. It really is. He's the former quarterback at Minnesota. Now he's coming back to play his former team. And really, here's the problem with Kaliakmanis. He hasn't had a good fantasy performance against any defense that has any kind of life. Like we talked about with Brosmer, his best performance was against USC, 21 fantasy points, or MAC competition or FCS competition. So probably a pass for me, even though this is a revenge game for him. And I do expect them to be trailing. I also think there's serious question marks on whether or not they can run the ball in this game because Kyle Monangai, their workhorse running back, is questionable. We'll get an update prior to kickoff. That is the good news. The Big Ten does require those these days. But if he doesn't play, this team's going to struggle. If he doesn't play, you can play Antoine Raymond because he will see the lion's share of the work if Monangai is out. That was what was evident against USC. I do think that he is a volume-based play if that happens because he's only $3,400. He's going to be getting starters carries on a team that likes to run the football. Minnesota's not a great rushing matchup. They only give up 133 rushing yards in the nation, which ranks 47th. But you're going to get 20 carries out of a guy who's $3,400, and you can't turn that down. At the wide receiver position, Demir Miller's in kind of a similar boat. He was targeted 20 times against USC. 20. Because pretty much all the other competent receiving options in this receiving room are hurt. Ian Strong missed their last game. Kyle Fletcher is out for the foreseeable future. I'm sorry, Kenny Fletcher, not Kyle Fletcher. So Demir Miller is like the only competent receiving option. He's going to continue to see a ton of carries. And y'all, I really... This is not the best game environment overall, but I could talk myself into doing one lineup that's a game stack of this game. Just because you know that if this game does in fact shoot out, it's going to be Taylor from Minnesota. It's going to be Monongai or Antoine Raymond for Rutgers. It's going to be Jackson or Spencer receiving. It's going to be Miller receiving. Like, if this game does in fact shoot out, you know exactly who the benefiting pieces are going to be. So I think you could really talk yourself into a game stack of this game, not because it's a great game to stack, but because it's not betting on certain players, it's betting on the game. Whereas, you look at other games that are better game environments like Miami and Georgia Tech, for instance, where you got to pick between a lot of players, whether that game shoots out, you don't know which player is going to benefit. This game you do. It's just less likely that the game shoots out. So just a little bit of DFS game theory there for you. Anyway, next up, we've got Purdue heading to Columbus to take on Ohio State. Ohio State's 37.5 point favorites, game total of 53.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 46-8 in favor of the Buckeyes. Purdue's bad. They're the worst team in Power 4 football. They're going to play two quarterbacks, Hudson Card and Ryan Brown, makes them both unplayable. Devin Mockabee is the running back. He's pretty solid, but he just hasn't had any success around an offensive line that just gets zero push, and I don't expect them to get that against Ohio State. The wide receiver position, Max Clare, their tight end, is the most competent one. I mean, we've seen him have decent games against good competition, but there's better options for cheaper that aren't on Purdue. On the Ohio State side, this is going to be a blowout, which we've seen them have at the start of the season. And so really that makes them more touchdown or bust plays. And really, I think you can look back to what they did at the start of the season to kind of know what to expect from them in this game. And Will Howard at the start of the season, when Ohio State was blowing people out, was not running the ball, was not scoring rushing touchdowns, was not seeing the amount of passing volume to pay off his salary. So he's probably going to be a pass for me. I think everybody on this Ohio State side is like a multiple touchdown or bust play. Yes, they have the upside to score multiple touchdowns. They're probably going to score 6 or 7 of them here in this game, but you need them to if you want them to pay off, because they're not going to be super aggressive offensively. They're not going to play the full game, most likely. It's a narrow pathway, man, especially at the running back position where you've got two guys, Judkins and Henderson, that are splitting carries 50-50. They're over $6,800 on DraftKings, Judson being $7,500, Henderson being $6,800. And you're going to need 100 yards and 2 touchdowns out of them to feel good. And that's just hard to expect when they're in a 50-50 committee. The good news is Purdue's the second worst rushing defense in all Power 4 teams, but that's just a lot, man. And really at the receiver position, it's the same way with Smith and Ibuka. With Jeremiah Smith, what you would be banking on is for him to break off long touchdowns, which he did at the start of the season. You would be banking on him getting that 100-yard bonus, which he did once at the start of the season. So to me, he would be the more so the guy I would play over Ibuka, who is a volume-based player. So really, if you're going to take a shot on anybody on this Ohio State team, to me, it would be Jeremiah Smith. Next up, we have Army taking on North Texas. We got Army on the DraftKings slate, which is fun. Triple option team, right? Army is currently projected to be 5.5 point favorites in this game with a game total of 63.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 35-29 in favor of the Black Knights. Bryson Daly threw everybody for a loop by being a surprise scratch last week against Air Force. On Saturday morning, it was announced. So everybody was scrambling because he was certainly going to be chalk on that day. Apparently, he's going to be good to go for this one. If he is good to go, he's one of the best quarterback plays on the slate. Don't care what the price tag is. Don't care about anything else. He's one of the best quarterback plays on the slate because of what he does rushing the football. And oh, by the way, North Texas is 108th in the nation in rush yards allowed, giving up 193 per game. And Army is the run happiest team in the nation, running their Service Academy triple option. So this is a spot where Daly could absolutely smash. At the running back spot, Kanye Udo had a huge performance without Daly in the lineup against Air Force. But hey, he could do that again with Daly in the lineup. You just saw a bigger workload because the backup quarterback was much more inclined to give the ball to Udo on the triple option, because Udo is the beatback. He is traditionally the dive option on the triple option. So, he was the benefit of the backup quarterback. And hey, maybe if, Daly doesn't want to take as many hits, maybe he hands it off to Udo. I could certainly see an argument to be made for that. And I could certainly see some upside from him at $5,900. Noah Short is their top A-back, who's usually the pitchback on the triple option. Not a super steady workload, but, he can break off some long plays. He's only $5,300. To me, he's more of a GPP play where you could get 1 or 2 long runs and all of a sudden he pays off his salary. Not even going to talk about the Army wide receivers because all they do is run the ball. On the North Texas side, here's what's interesting about North Texas. Army has the best rush defense in the nation, only giving up 71 yards per game. So they're going to be looking to throw the ball. And that's good news because they rank sixth in the nation in pass rate anyway. The one thing that you get concerned with teams playing Army, though, is because of the offense the Army runs. If Army has the ball for 40 minutes in this game, then that's going to kind of limit the number of plays that they can get off. But the good news is that North Texas is going to be throwing it all over the yard. They're going to be, behind in this game quite likely. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Chandler Morris, even if Army does grind out a lot of clock. So I think that Chandler Morris is a great play. He's been over 33 DraftKings points in each of his last 4 games. I think along with Daly, I think they make for 2 of the top quarterback plays on the slate. If you ask me to power rank them, I probably have Cam Ward 1, Daly 2, Morris 3. And then there's a pretty sizable gap after that, in my opinion. At the running back position, they might get Ikaika Ragsdale back for this game. North Texas might. But with Army's run defense being so good, I'm just not interested. At the wide receiver position, they are getting healthier from the last time we saw them. Last week, they had 3 top receivers, DT Sheffield getting 12 targets, Damon Ward, or Damon Ward, I guess, 9 targets, and then Dalton Carnes, 5 targets. So to me, all 3 of those guys, those are the ones that are playing the snaps at the wide receiver position. Those are the guys that I want to be targeting, regardless of price tag. If you're playing Chandler Morris, you certainly want to stack him up with 1, if not 2 of his passing options. So he's certainly interested in playing those 3 guys. Next up, we have got the game of the day, in my opinion. The Georgia Dogs taking on the Ole Miss Rebels. Georgia is 2.5-point favorites with a game total of 54.5, meaning the implied total is about 28 to 26 in favor of the Dogs. Carson Beck for Georgia is finally at the right price. We talked about all season long how Carson Beck is overpriced. It's really hard for him to hit value for his price tag. Now he's at a spot where he can do it. Unfortunately, he's just been playing quite poor lately, so we're going to need a better Carson Beck than what we've gotten. But that could certainly be the case against an Ole Miss defense that ranks 91st in the nation, giving up 245 passing yards per game. They are the 3rd best run defense in the nation, giving up 89 yards per game. So you're going to beat this team by throwing the ball. Carson Beck can do it. I think he's a great game stack play because I think if this game does shoot out, it's going to be Carson Beck having a ton of yards, ton of touchdowns like he did against Alabama in that game that obviously shot out. At the running back spot for Georgia, Trevor Etienne is supposedly good to go for this one. He did leave the Florida game quite early. I'm not interested in him because he's just too expensive. If he does not go, if something changes, Nate Frazier, I think, is a great play at $3,500. Like the kid from Rutgers, I think he's a volume-based play. Even though the matchup is bad, you're getting a starting running back for $3,500 on a team that does run the football. At the wide receiver position, Arian Smith, Dylan Bell, Dominic Lovett, they're the ones that are playing all the snaps. They're the ones you want to go with very clearly, in my opinion. The one that was the best last week was Dominic Lovett, 10 targets in that game against Florida. He is like the middle of the field king, which is what Georgia has had a lot of success with in the last 2 years, throwing to Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. I think Lovett fits that role the best. I think he's the guy I would want to be playing more so than anybody else. On the Ole Miss side, this team's banged up. They got Jackson Dart at quarterback. He finally broke the slate against Arkansas, and he wasn't even highly owned by a whole lot of people at all. He's a game stack play to me. He's quite expensive. He's only hit that value for that salary once in SEC play. If you think this game shoots out, go for it. Play Carson Beck on the other side. Find a way to make it work. But I'm not interested in just playing Dart as a one-off play. At the running back position, to me, it does shape up like it's going to be Ulysses Bentley as the starter. Rashad Amos could absolutely be the starter, but he hadn't done a whole lot this year to bank on. Ulysses Bentley has been kind of the RB2 for this team the last 2 seasons, so we know what he's capable of. We know he can come in there in a spot start and be solid. $3,200 for a starting running back is a pretty reasonable price. I don't mind going with Ulysses Bentley because of that. The other option is Dominique Thomas, who did have 10 carries against Arkansas. I think that was mostly in garbage time. So I think that between the options presented to me, Ulysses Bentley would be the guy you would want for Ole Miss. At the wide receiver position, Trey Harris, Jordan Watkins, both listed as doubtful. Caden Lee listed as questionable. Watkins smashed last week without Trey Harris in the lineup because Trey Harris is an absolute target monster. And y'all, if Harris is out, the target's got to go somewhere. Last week they went to Watkins. If Watkins is out, they got to go somewhere. 2 weeks before it went to Caden Lee. But now if he's out, then really you're left with a lot of different options, right? Now Daquan Wright did play in the game against Arkansas and have 9 catches for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. He might be the guy who's the beneficiary of all those guys missing. Juice Wells, a.k.a. Antoine Wells Jr., has been a steady contributor for this offense all season long. So if we do get the top 3 receivers out, I do think that Wright and Wells make for very, very cheap plays that you could play as one-off plays, or you could play as like bringbacks from a Georgia stack or even parts of an Ole Miss stack. You could certainly use to bring costs down because Jackson Dart and Carson Beck would cost you a lot of money. So I definitely don't mind the idea of playing those two guys, but let's get updates on Harrison Watkins and Lee first. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to get to our last 4 games. Now, before we carry on, I do want to remind you, if this video helps you out in any way, please hit the like button. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. I cannot stress enough how much it helps me when you guys do that. If I'm able to help you in any way, please repay the favor to me by showing support for the podcast. Like the video, rate and review. Shout me out on Twitter, tell a friend, whatever. I cannot stress enough how much it helps when you guys do that, because the only way that you grow a community is through the community. And so I really do appreciate when you guys do that. If you could do that for me, that'd be great. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the next game, which is Iowa State taking on Kansas. Iowa State is 3-point favorites with a game total of 50.5 points. The implied total is about 27-24 in favor of Iowa State. Honestly, I kind of like Kansas in this game. Kansas is a team that's gotten very unlucky this season with some of the games they've lost. I think they're better than their record says they are. I think Iowa State is not. I kind of think this is a good spot for Kansas. But anyway, let's talk about it. So on the Iowa State side, Kansas is a defense that is better against the pass than the run. They rank 67th in the nation in passing yards allowed, 91st in the nation in rushing yards allowed. However, they have played some very run-heavy, run-successful teams like Kansas State, like UNLV, so that certainly contributed to that. But for Iowa State, you can really play a lot of pieces of this offense. Rocco Beck is very reasonably priced. He's $6,900. In the last 4 games, he's had 3 of them over 20 fantasy points. It's quite reasonable for his price tag, in my opinion. He hasn't hit the 300-yard bonus in either of those games either, while he was very close to it. So I think this is a great spot for him. I think he has a ton of upside. I think there's a chance this game could shoot out because I think the Kansas offense could have a breakout game. And so if this game does shoot out, Beck is an absolutely great play at $6,900. At the running back position, here's where it gets interesting. Like we said, Kansas is a defense you want to target through the run. This is the team that gives 3 running backs carries. Carson Hansen had been the guy, then was hurt, but he played. And against Texas Tech had 11 carries, 46 yards. Jalen Jackson played the whole season, was the guy like in the middle of the season, week 5, week 6, week 7, 6 carries against Texas Tech. Abu Sama, the guy everybody was hyped about, had huge games last year as a freshman. Everybody's drafting him in best ball. Everybody's hyped to play him at the start of the season. He looks like the guy in the backfield coming in. Middle of the season, he's quite poor. Last week, 13 carries, 74 yards. So Abu Sama led the committee last week. This is a guy that we know is talented. We know has upside. We know can break off long runs. If he's going to lead the committee, then at $3,400, he's a great play. I don't have any issue with playing Hansen or Jackson, especially if you're somebody who knows Iowa State, who watches Iowa State a lot, and you're like, oh, Hansen's the better player, play Hansen. If you think that way, go for it. I'm going to take shots at Sama, though. That's just how I feel. At the wide receiver spot, this is the easiest team on the planet to target for the wide receiver spot. Literally, they get like 2/3 of their total passing production from 2 players. It's Jaden Higgins, it's Jaylen Noel, and now the downside is they are being priced up. These 2 guys combined for 24 targets last week. 15 of them to Higgins, 9 to Noel. These are the 2 guys you play, point blank. And even though they've been priced up, Higgins to 7,100, Noel to 6,100. Even though they've been priced up, they still average well over 3 times value for their salary. So if you play both of them and they just do their averages, you're going to get 3 times value, if not a little more. So great plays, in my opinion. Every time they're on the slate at these prices, I play them. If you're somebody who wants to count up like game totals, in 3 of the last 5 games, Higgins has been the leader. In 2 of the last 5, Noel has been the leader. They both have about equal upside. They're pretty similar players. They're definitely guys that I'm going to be getting to. I'm going to be playing them as stacking partners. I'm going to be playing as one-off plays. If you're playing Rocco Beck, I think you can play one of them. I think you can play both of them, if I'm being honest. Now, on the Kansas side, Iowa State is a rush funnel. Iowa State runs a defense where the majority of the time they play with 3 high safeties. That takes one guy out of the box. And that leads to them giving up a lot of rushing yards, but not a whole lot of passes downfield, as evidenced by the numbers. Iowa State ranks 4th in the nation in passing yards allowed, 84th in the nation in rushing yards allowed. Jalen Daniels for Kansas is a rushing quarterback. His best games this season have came when he's gotten in the end zone for a rushing touchdown, and he's only $5,800 on this slate. I think he is your pay down quarterback on the slate. I think he's going to be popular. You just look at the last 3 games. He's been over 22 fantasy points in each game. We know he's super talented. We know that there's a new offensive coordinator that they haven't really meshed yet. But this is just a great spot for him at a great price tag in an offense that's going to allow him to use his unique abilities to score the most fantasy points. At the running back spot, I also think this is a smash spot for Devin Neal. He is the workhorse running back now that Daniel Highshaw is injured, and I don't think Highshaw plays in this game. Neal's being used in the passing game. He scored over 19 fantasy points in each of the last 3 games. It's a great spot for Devin Neal, especially knowing that he's getting the lion's share of the carries. So if you don't want to play Jaylen Daniels, you do want to play Jaylen Neal. If, like me, you think that Jaylen Daniels is going to be popular, that he's going to be a chalky quarterback, why not play Neal for some leverage on that chalky play and just say, hey, if Daniels isn't accounting for the touchdowns, somebody else is, and it's going to be Devin Neal. I think that's a pretty solid strategy. At the wide receiver spot, like we said, this is a defense you don't really pass the ball deep against. And Kansas has 3 receivers that they really target: Grimm, Arnold, and Skinner. Grimm has been by far the most targeted one over the course of the season. I think he's the guy you want. But I don't think you even have to stack Jaylen Daniels. I don't think you have to play him as a one-off play just because of the fact that Daniels does so much with his legs, and Iowa State does prevent the deep pass. Next up, we've got Clemson taking on Virginia Tech. Clemson is 6.5-point favorites with a game total of 56.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 30-24 in favor of the Tigers. Kate Klubnik and the rest of the Clemson offense kind of came a little bit down to earth against Louisville. It was just a goofy game. If you watched, Clemson was missing field goals all over the place, and it should have been like a 1-possession game with Clemson having the ball and a chance to tie it, but it just didn't end up that way. I'm willing to write that one off as just a goofy game. I think Klubnik is still a solid play. As mentioned earlier, I would rather play Daly and Chandler Morris and Cam Ward, but I think Klubnik's a pretty solid play as well, and I think he's going to be lower owned than all those options. At the running back position, Phil Maffa is just he's a misprice. He's a workhorse running back. They were running him significant carries long into that game against Louisville when they were down multiple touchdowns. He's too cheap at $6,500. He's a chalk play. He's good chalk, though. In college football DFS, fading good chalk can lose you money. And I'm certainly not going to full fade Phil Maffa. He's got too big of a workload, just too cheap of a price tag. Just play him. At the wide receiver position, this kind of became a little bit of a mess last week. Antonio Williams, though, was still their most targeted receiver, 8 targets in that game, 15.2 DraftKings points. Jake Briningstool, still a tight end, not used as much in that game, only caught 3 passes. The rest of the receiving core, though, got a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it was a smaller slice of the pie because freshman sensation Bryant Wesco was back in the lineup. And so what you see amongst all these Clemson receivers is they're not getting the same production that they had when Wesco was hurt. But Wesco is back. He's only $3,100. And in that game, he did catch 7 passes for 53 yards. So I think this is a really good spot for Wesco at that price tag. I think this Clemson offense, I don't think Klubnik necessarily is going to be very popular, but I do think that Maffa and I do think that playing the receivers, whether it's Williams, whether it's TJ Moore, or whether it's Bryant Wesco, are going to be popular plays, especially Wesco. On the Virginia Tech side, Kyron Drones sat out last week against Syracuse. It was a surprise scratch. No one really saw it coming. He's apparently going to play this game. He is primarily a running quarterback. I don't think that the Clemson defense is the best matchup for that. We haven't seen running quarterbacks really go off against them so far this season, but they also haven't played like a murderer's row of quarterbacks. I think he's a low-owned GPP play. Maybe if you get him and he runs for 100 yards and 2 scores, you might win. So that would be my usage of Kyron Drones. At the running back position, Bashal Tootin missed last week against Syracuse also. I'm not interested in him if he does play, even though he is one of the most workhorse running backs out there. He's just too expensive going up against a good run defense in a game environment where they're likely going to be trailing. The wide receiver spot, we just don't get one receiver targeted consistently enough for there to be really consideration in this wide receiver room, in my opinion. DeQuan Felton, I am going to give a little bit of a shout to, though. He was their number 1 receiver at the end of last season. He is starting to play like that. Only $3,500. You could have worse plays out there. Next up, we got Michigan taking on Indiana. And who would have thought back in August that Indiana was going to be favored to win this game? Not me, that's for sure. Indiana is 14-point favorites. Game total 48.5 points. Implied total 31-17 in favor of Indiana. And I just got to be honest, I just fail to see how Michigan gets to 17 points against Indiana with their current offense. Just not seeing it. Davis Warren's going to start at quarterback. Alex Orji's going to come in and run the ball every now and then. Can't play either of them. Indiana's one of the best run defenses in the nation, second in the nation, actually. Mullings and Edwards, they're super cheap. Michigan's going to run the football, but that's a bad matchup. And maybe I could see Edwards as a GPP play because he does have a tendency to break off long runs, but man, it's hard to talk yourself into any of the two of those. I can't talk myself into Colston Loveland though, because when this team does throw the ball, it does go to him. 9 targets against Oregon, continued his run of good games, 21 DraftKings points or more in back-to-back games. I think he's a pretty solid play at $4,800. That's a very reasonable price tag. On the Indiana side, Curtis Rourke is back. He was back against Michigan State. This Michigan defense is pretty tough, though. I have no desire to play Rourke at $7,400 against the Michigan defense. Justice Ellison is still kind of the leader of the committee in the backfield for Indiana. It's not a great matchup, though, so it's really going to be tough sledding, especially considering how much they split carries. At the wide receiver position, this team spreads the ball around so much. You just never know who's going to be their leading receiver. Surratt is the one who it is most consistently, but Cooper, Price, Williams, Cross, the tight end Horton, they're all going to be a part of the passing game. So even though Indiana is implied to score 31 points, they're a really difficult offense to target because of how spread out their production is. Next up, last game of the day, the hammer game. We've got Colorado heading to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech. Colorado is 3.5-point favorites with an implied total of 62.5. That is the third highest on the slate. So the implied total is about 33-30 in favor of Colorado. Shedeur Sanders is Colorado's starting quarterback, and I've said this about Shedeur time and time again. He gives you basically zero rushing upside. You're going to need 300 yards. You're going to need multiple scores. If you want him to hit value, and against Texas Tech, he could do that. This Texas Tech defense is pretty bad. I do think that there's a chance he does that, and I think he's kind of flying a little bit under the radar here on this slate. I'll take an unknown Shedeur Sanders any day of the week. Colorado's backfield, look, they're one of the pass happiest team in the nation. They split carries, just a hard pass. At the wide receiver spot, if I play this Colorado side, though, I don't think I'm going to play it through Travis Hunter. He's left 2 games early and left you absolute duds. The other ones other than that have all been 23 fantasy points or more. But I don't know. I have a tough time paying up $9,500 for a receiver here on this slate. I would much rather pay down to a guy like LeJonte Wester, who's getting consistent usage. And then you've also got Jimmy Horn Jr., who's consistently out on the field. And then Will Shepard, who is, again, consistently out on the field at much cheaper price tags. You don't necessarily know that they're going to have the biggest games, but you know that they're going to have opportunities. So I really would prefer to play this through the cheap Colorado receivers, in my opinion. On the Texas Tech side, Baron Morton is their starting quarterback, and this Colorado defense is much more likely to be had via the ground than the air. So I would rather just play Texas Tech through their ground game, and that would be with Taj Brooks. He is one of the most workhorsey backs on the slate. I think he's one of the best running back plays on the slate. Over 21 carries in every game this season except the North Texas game, which they won by 45 points. So he's seen a super consistent, super steady workload. I think if you're talking about running backs, I think the overall top plays at the position, I probably have Darius Taylor 1. I would have Taj Brooks 2. And I would probably have LaQuint Allen 3 and Phil Maffa 4. That's just how I see the overall top running back plays. And Brooks is right there near the top of the list. He's a great play. I think if you're running a game stack of this game, I think stacking up the Colorado quarterback and receivers with Taj Brooks, and then maybe one of these Texas Tech receivers is great as well, because right now you have 2 guys hogging all the targets for Texas Tech. Caleb Douglas had the big DraftKings games, 3 games in a row of 19 DraftKings points or more, came back down to earth a little bit against Iowa State. Why? Because he's dependent on the deep ball. And what does Iowa State not allow y'all? The deep ball. We talked about it earlier. So I do think that kind of was just a stylistic bad matchup for Caleb Douglas. I do think he could absolutely be back this week. Josh Kelly is not a deep ball receiver. He was targeted 18 times against Iowa State. Most of them were very short. He did catch 8 of them for 2 touchdowns, 35.7 DraftKings points. So to me, if you're looking to play this Texas Tech offense, you've got 3 very concentrated skilled players, Brooks, Kelly, and Douglas, who are all 3 in play. And I think you can play them without the quarterback stack if you choose to do so. But all right, that's going to do it for this slate, y'all. We broke down all 12 games, went over all the top plays. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need in order to build some winning DraftKings lineups for this slate. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button. It really does help me a ton when you guys do that. I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate it. But that's pretty much it for this slate, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That you can be with us for the Saturday night slate, as well as all of our additional midweek slates that we're able to get in, as well as all of the college basketball content's going to be coming your way. And then remember, if you do want more from me, join the Fantasy Corner Discord, follow me on Twitter, head on over to the Patreon. You do get the core plays for every college football slate, even if I don't have an episode for that slate. So you'll just be able to have access to those for any slate. This Saturday is going to be interesting for me because I'm actually going to be at a flag football field like right up until tip-off. So I don't know how much tinkering with the lineups I'm going to do. Might be one of those where I have to set it on Friday and kind of assume that I know what's going to happen with injuries and then global player swap if I have to. But we'll see how it goes. I do feel like I have a pretty good read on this slate, and I hope I was able to give you guys a pretty good read on this slate by going over all that information. So best of luck to you guys here on this Saturday main slate. Thank you guys for watching us to this point, and I will see you guys next time. And always for the road,